Today, I'm going to try growing crystals from this expired cold medicine I found at home. To be exact, it's a fever and pain reliever called aspirin. Expired medicine is supposed to be discarded, but since it would be a waste, I'm going to make crystals from it. Now, let's talk a little bit about aspirin. It's a type of fever and pain reliever that has been around since 1897. The active ingredient is acetylsalicylic acid, which you can see in this structural formula here. It's derived from salicylic acid, a compound found in willow bark, but modified to have fewer side effects. Because it has a relatively simple structure and a long history of use, acetylsalicylic acid is often studied in school. In Japan, for example, it's covered in high school chemistry classes. Aspirin tablets contain about 50% acetylsalicylic acid, while the rest consists of fillers like starch and cellulose to make the pills easier to swallow. Since this compound is covered in high school chemistry and has a relatively simple molecular structure, recrystallizing acetylsalicylic acid from aspirin tablets is sometimes performed as a student experiment. Alright, that was a bit of a long introduction, but let's get started with the experiment. First, I need to remove the fillers from the tablets to extract the acetylsalicylic acid. Since I cannot do this while they're still in tablet form, I start by crushing them. I'll take 8 aspirin tablets, put them in a plastic bag, and seal it shut. Then, I'll crush them with a hammer. That looks good enough. Next, I'll add the crushed powder to a beaker containing a stirring bar. I'll pour in 200 milliliters of hot water, making sure to rinse the bag with some of the water to collect all the powder. I'll turn on the hot plate with the magnetic stirrer and heat the mixture while stirring for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I filter the solution little by little to remove the insoluble fillers. Looking inside the funnel, I can see that as the solution cools, some crystals are already starting to form. This might reduce the final yield. Once filtration is complete, I let the solution cool down naturally to allow the crystals to form. After cooling to room temperature, I placed it in the fridge. The crystals are small, but I can see a lot of white crystals forming. Now, I filter the solution again to collect the crystals. The yield is about 65%, which isn't very high, but it is what it is. If this were a student experiment, the next step would be hydrolyzing the acetylsalicylic acid into salicylic acid and performing a color reaction with ferric chloride to compare them. But since this channel is all about crystal growing, I won't be doing that. Instead, I'll try growing even larger crystals next. I transfer all the crystals into a glass container and rinse the bag with 10 milliliters of ethanol, adding it to the container as well. I had heard that acetylsalicylic acid dissolves well in ethanol, so I expected it to dissolve easily, but it's not dissolving at all. I'll put the lid on and try heating it in a hot water bath. It's a bit cloudy, but it dissolved easily. Wait a second. Wouldn't it have been better to just use ethanol from the start and heat it in a water bath? The slight cloudiness is probably due to some fillers that weren't completely removed in the initial filtration. I filter it again to get rid of them completely. After filtration, I cover the container with plastic wrap and leave it in a well-ventilated area to cool. Here's what it looks like after sitting overnight. I was a bit worried that I'd end up with fine crystals again, but I'm happy to see that proper crystals have formed. Taking them out, they look like this. Looking at them closely, I can see that they're actually clusters of fairly flat-shaped crystals. Now, for the final step, I want to try growing a single crystal. First, I'll try growing crystals using the density diffusion method. However, since I don't have much acetylsalicylic acid available, I'll have to keep the scale small this time. Take a look at this. It's about half the size of the test tube I usually use. Unfortunately, it didn't go well. Here is the crystals I grew over the course of a month using the density diffusion method, but as you can see, they're cloudy and have a bad shape. So this time, I'll try growing crystals by slowly cooling the solution at a rate of 0.2 degrees Celsius every 5 hours. I recorded a time lapse of the crystal growth. This time, it looks like it's working. And here is the final result. Compared to the one grown using the density diffusion method, this crystal has much more defined faces. It's also noticeably clearer. That said, the final size is only about 1 centimeter, which feels a bit small. But since I'm running low on raw materials, I think I'll stop here for now. And that's it for today. This time, I made crystals from expired aspirin. As I mentioned at the beginning, recrystallizing acetylsalicylic acid from aspirin is a common student experiment, and I've done it myself before. However, this was my first time trying to grow a single crystal. I hope you found this interesting. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching.